Do you believe that there are eternal consequences that befall you if you violate your oath of office?
Yes, it's a sacred oath.
Do you believe the U.S. Supreme Court is the final arbiter of the constitutional law, or is it really the people who decide?
The Supreme Court is what we have in our Constitution. People can like it or not, but that is the final arbiter. We can try and change the law, I suppose. But it's the Supreme Court.
What is your opinion on genetically modified foods?
It's a dangerous path to take. Basically, to have that, you have to sterilize, other food sources or food crops. And I'm not an agronomist, but you're starting to alter, basic staples in the case of corn and other things. And guess what? If a couple companies, we'll call it Monsanto, big companies like that, if they have the genetic patents and they decide to not have them available, then we have a problem.
Now, do you believe that the legality of marijuana use is a federal concern or should be dealt with on the state level?
In the states you're dealing with right now.
All right. Do you believe that the United States military should intervene in a foreign humanitarian crisis? Syria being as the current.
Well, Syria won't be a humanitarian crisis if you're getting shot at. Okay, so define humanitarian. I've been in Bangladesh on a humanitarian crisis. We weren't getting shot at. Okay, if there's any possibility of our military being deployed in a combat zone, which Syria is, no, not without a declaration of war.
And do you believe the definition of marriage is a federal concern or should be dealt with on the state level?
It's a state issue. There's no federal license to be married.
And would you vote for any legislation that would authorize or enforce the implementation of a national ID card?
I vote for any. I think that starts to get close to encroaching on our rights. I mean, there's good arguments back and forth. Right now, I would say I could support that. We have all sorts of IDs that the federal government takes right now. And I don't know why a federal ID makes it any better, security-wise, or any other. I don't know how it enhances what we have right now.
Now, up there earlier, there was a question asked you about the EPA, about getting rid of the federal EPA.
Yeah.
Now, one of the alternates is a free market solution to the EPA, and talks about property rights. How would you be able to enforce property rights so that an individual, if their property was polluted on, be able to...
Right. So the EPA, the question that I didn't like up there, because it's a federal agency, what I want to do with the EPA, Department of Education, I want to push it down to the state level, because it's the states with their land, with their property rights, and the citizenry that we're talking about here. In the case of a business owner, and the EPA creates unnecessary burdens, regulatory burdens, I want the state to be there versus the federal government. I may not like it, but it's at the local level, not the federal level. Anything we do at the federal level adds more time and money. So when I said do away with the EPA, yeah, I would like to push that down to the state level, because I think states, or property rights is a great example, are better understood, closer to state level of me as a property owner arguing with the municipality or the state, or a jurisdiction within the state versus the federal government. So, in that context, yeah, I think the EPA should be pushed down, to the state level versus kept at the federal level.
But do you believe that personal property rights can be enforced to...
Are you talking about eminent domain?
Eminent domain, anything that has to do with
personal property rights is just that. They're my property. It's my property. I shouldn't be compelled to sell or liquidate my property if I choose not to. So I mean, eminent domain, it's been abused.
Well,
it's been abused.
I guess the example I'm looking at is as if you say, for example, you had ExxonMobil refinery right next to your home, and you started noticing that you were getting into your property pollution, contaminants, family members coming down with illnesses. Do you believe that personal property rights would be able to give the individual...
They're violating my property rights, absolutely, absolutely. But I would question the merits of that zoning case. We put a housing development right next to a refinery. It probably exists.
In Louisiana, actually.
It does, but the bottom line is we have to have reasonableness. Who was there first? Okay, and what's reasonable here? When they got, so let's say the homes were. When the refinery came in, there was checks and balances at all levels, federal, state, and even local municipal levels they had to agree to. Now, and that didn't include polluting your neighbor's property. So if that's what's happening, then you're now violating your neighbor's property rights, and it has to be remedied.
Now, with the biggest one is the one everyone always talks about is the National Defense Authorization Act. Those two specific subsections.
They don't belong there.
Exactly.
It has nothing to do with funding the military. It has everything to do about eroding our rights as Americans. It has nothing to do with what the military's job is, to protect and defend this country against foreign enemies and domestic enemies. But the two issues that we're talking about here, as they don't belong in the National Defense Authorization Act. I would have made that very, very clear in my vote against it if it wasn't taken out. Again, I'm a military guy. I believe in the military. I believe it should be funded. But I also believe when there are parts of any bill, and we're talking about the National Defense Authorization Act, that don't belong there, they can't be there. Or else I'm going to vote against it. I mean, it just adds to a further erosion of our rights as U.S. citizens. It could add more to a police state, and that's not good.
And the last thing, do you believe in conscription? And if so, does it fall in line with the principles of liberty?
Well, they had conscription during the Revolutionary War. I mean, it was a real national defense, national security issue there. It worked. And I think that when you look at the 10 years plus that we've been at war, I would wonder that if we had conscription, would these people be voting to continue the wars? So it's an interesting proposition. I think there's a real national emergency, a real national defense issue that we're attacked, like World War II. I don't know the trade towers counts up because there wasn't a foreign army invading us. I think we have to look at conscription because we're now talking about the defense of this nation and invading force. So I think in that context, absolutely. If there's a threat, a foreign army coming to our shores, absolutely, everyone has to pick up their pack and be part of this thing. But the caveat there, you know, there are a lot of jobs in the military that don't include squeezing the trigger. Okay, so if somebody is a conscientious objector, there's still jobs for those people. Okay, but again, wars that have gone on in our generation are undeclared, they're way too long, they're way too costly. There's no definition of what the war is. So who wants to be conscripted in that scenario? So again, getting back to the Constitution, Congress declares war. Okay, and if it's a national import to do that, and I think that we're going to be invaded. There's a real foreign military threat to this country. I think conscription has to be in play.
I know I said one more, but I got one more question. It has related to healthcare. Now, would you introduce legislation that would give the opportunity to, if not abolish the Affordable Health Care Act, but provide competition for it by giving the individual the ability to have a privately medical option where
absolutely. There's got to be a free market solution. Okay, the Affordable Health Care Act, it's not that. It's double what it was said to be, and it is a tax, okay? It compels you to do something. It's a tax. I don't know how that's constitutional, but I'm not a Supreme Court justice. But the bottom line is, you've got to infuse real-world free market solutions, and there are none right now in the Affordable Care Act. So it's going to fail. And quite frankly, when it's pushed down the states, because of the 10th Amendment, the states can push back.
Exactly.
So it goes back to everybody responsible for upholding the Constitution, not just those people in the Congress of the United States, but those state legislatures as well.
All right, thanks. Thanks a lot, Mark.
You're welcome.
Yep.